The floatplane conversion was performed using Hyperion floats. They are 26 inches in length, 680 millimeters, and are foam. The floats are green, but are easily painted, and I painted mine silver using the acrylic paint obtainable from the dollar store. The final product is silver, and once the paint is dry, it is completely waterproof. The floats come with mounting hardware, but I think it is intended for hacker type of airplanes and cannot be used for this conversion. To make the struts, I used aluminum from the hardware store. It is ½ inch wide, and the thickness is 1/16 of an inch. Now when you buy this, it seems extremely flexible, but don't worry, because once it's a triangle like this, it's quite sturdy. To create the hard points on the aircraft where the struts are secured, I used plywood. And what you have to do is to cut a little groove into the foam. Now the width of my plywood from here to the back there is approximately 7/8 of an inch. That allows for a little bit wider grip of the wooden support when it's glued to the foam. And then the strut is screwed to the center of that wooden strip. The plywood is 1/4 inch thick, and the width from the front to the back is approximately 7/8 of an inch, just under an inch. The depth of the cutout that you make in the foam should be deep enough for the 1/4 inch plywood to go in, and also so that when you have your strut screwed on, that is more or less flush here. Aerodynamically, that's reasonably efficient. I cut the plywood at an angle to more or less follow the round fuselage. To decide where the cutouts are made, I had a look at the inside, and there are 2 spots where the foam is thicker than in the rest of the fuse. So there's a thick spot on the inside here, and on the inside another thick spot here, so it gives you lots of foam where you can make your cutout. The center line between these 2 screws on the front strut is exactly 5.5 inches from the back edge of the cowl, and once again measured from the back edge of the cowl to the center line of the mounting of the rear strut is 14 inches and 1/8. The dimensions of the struts are as follows. The distance between these 2 angles is 2 inches. The length of each strut from there to the next angle over there is 5 3/4 of an inch. That's front and rear the same. Then the vertical part that attaches to the float over here on the front strut is 9/16 of an inch, and on the back one, in other words there, it is 3/4 of an inch. So the back one is longer than the front one, and the distance where the screw goes through is ½ an inch from there to there, right, on both. So the front one is 9/16, the back one 3/4, and on both of them the screw goes in ½ an inch from the bottom. The distance between the 2 floats, center to center, is exactly 12 inches. So this center strut is 12 inches between the 2 screws on the top. In order to mount the float correctly onto the aircraft, you want to position it so that the step is just at or slightly behind the center of gravity, and you need the correct angle of incidence on the wing, which is between 0 and 2 degrees positive. Now if you use the dimensions I gave you for the struts, then you need to mount the front strut. The center screw on this mount here should be 10 3/8 of an inch measured from the front of the float. The rear strut, this one, the center screw here is exactly 19 inches from the front of the float, measured like that. I put my horizontal struts on the front, behind, and in the back in front of the main strut, so the stabilizer that runs across. The distance that you position the float relative to the fuselage is really important, so that you have the step in the right spot. Using the dimensions I provided here, you should be able to line up the floats exactly as it is on my airplane, and it seems to work really well that way. To make things a bit more interesting, I added 2 LEDs to the airplane. These are 3.3 volt LEDs. They're wired up in serial, and I have a 220 ohm resistor in serial with that in order to protect them from the battery voltage. The connection for the LEDs is just wired straight into the battery plug. The LEDs are always on when the battery is plugged in. The original site where the main gear entered into the fuselage is over here, but it's a float plane now, so I don't want this opening there, otherwise water will get in. So I used some of the foam that was cut out here and just stuffed it in there, and that way those two cutouts are now sealed and water can't get in. There are two air scoops on the back of the airplane underneath, and once again, to keep water out, I used plastic spoons to make a little reverse scoop. This way it'll act like a venturi from the front, and seems to work really well, but water can't get in anymore. The tail wheel was simply removed for the float plane. My aircraft is not used with a high wing anymore, so I don't need the strong screw attachment for the canopy. So I filled up the original screw tract here with foam and made a little hatch. Now it's really easy and quick to take the canopy off in order to put the battery in. The little latch here is made from small pieces of aluminum. The spring here is from a ballpoint pen, and it's just a little wire basically that goes into the pin here on the back of the canopy. I think if you're going to fly with a high wing, then just use the screw because it'll be more secure. On my friend's aircraft, the wings actually came off in flight and caused quite a bit of damage. So although they are attached with strong magnets, I am concerned that in aggressive aerobatics the wings may separate. So what I've done is to just glue in a little hook into each tube back here, and I just fasten it with a tiny piece of wire on the inside. This way I know the wings cannot separate. Using this setup as described and the measurements as provided, it was not necessary to move the battery at all, as the center of gravity did not change on the airplane. I found that the standard cutout on the rudder actually limited movement of the elevator, so I had to make the cutout a little bit bigger to enable more extreme aerobatics. Overall, the float plane conversion took approximately 2 hours. I haven't weighed it yet, but it certainly did not add much weight to the aeroplane, and this is my favorite foam float plane at this time.